I am Dr. Sajita, Director, Theresian College, from the Department of English, present before you the Book of Job, prescribed for MA English by the University of Mysore. The greatest literary masterpiece of the Old Testament, the Book of Job, is concerned with the inadequacy of worldly standard of happiness and righteousness. But the suffering of Job is so overwhelming and so magnificently expressed that even with our knowledge of its purpose and its meaning, it seems excessive. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there born unto him were 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance was also 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the East. Joseph in the Old Testament suffered slavery, exile, and imprisonment, but turned them all to account. Job loses his family and wealth in a series of calamities, which strike one on the other like hammer blows, and is then plagued with a loathsome disease. Unlike Joseph, he is old. He cannot adopt himself and rise above adverse circumstances, and he no longer wishes to understand the reason for his suffering. For his friends, the explanation is simple. With the blindness of men who know no standards other than those of the world, they are sure that Job's misfortune must be the result of some wickedness on his part. But Job is confident in his righteousness. His torture is as much mental as physical. He cannot reconcile the fact of his innocence with the calamities that has come on him with all the decisive suddenness of the hand of God. The full explanation is never given to him, but it is given to the reader in the 2 opening chapters of the book. This prologue to the dramatic section of the work gives us the knowledge that is hidden from the participants in the ensuing dialogue. The writer uses the method, characteristics of Greek tragedy, irony, the deeper understanding of the dramatic spoken word that is based on the superior knowledge of the audience. The prologue explains God's motive in allowing Job to suffer. It is an important one. God intends to use Job as a demonstration to his skeptical subordinate Satan of the fact that a human being can retain faith in God's justice in the face of the greatest imaginable suffering. This motive, which Job does not know and which is never revealed to him, gives to the dialogue between Job and his friends its suspense and its importance. God has rested his case that humanity is capable. The arguments of Job's friends are based on the worldly equation that success equals virtue. they attempt to undermine Job's faith, not in God but in himself. Whoever perished being innocent? Ask Eliphaz. Or where were the righteous cut off? Job's misfortune is a proof that he must have sinned. All he has to do is to admit his guilt and ask God for pardon, which he will surely receive. He refuses to accept this easy way out, and we know that he is right. In fact, we know from the prologue that he has been selected for misfortune not because he has sinned, but precisely because of his outstanding virtue. There is none like him in the earth, God says, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. What Job must do is to persevere not only in his faith in God's justice, but also in the conviction of his own innocence. He must believe the illogical, accept a paradox. His friends are offering him an easy way out, one that seems to be the way of humility and submission. But it is the false way. And God finally tells them so. The Lord says to Eliphaz the Temanite, "My wrath is kindled against thee and against thy two friends. For you have not spoken of me the thing that is right, as my servant Job hath." Like Oedipus, he refuses to stop short of the truth. He even uses the same words, "Let me alone, that I may speak, and let come on me what will." He finally expresses his understanding and acceptance of the paradox involved in the combination of suffering with his innocence, but he does so with a human independence and dignity. "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him, but I will maintain mine own ways before him." He sums up his case with a detailed account of the righteousness of his ways, and it is clear that this account is addressed not only to his three friends but also to God. "My desire is that the Almighty would answer me," he says. His friends are silenced by the majesty and firmness of his statement. They ceased to answer Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. But God is moved to reply. Job's confidence in his own righteousness is not pride, but intellectual honesty. He sees that the problem is much harder than his friends imagine. To let them persuade him of his own guilt would lighten his mental burden by answering the question that tortures him. But his intelligence will not let him yield. The magnificent poetry of that reply, the voice out of the whirlwind, still does not give Job the full explanation, God's motive in putting him to the torture. It is a triumphant proclamation of God's power and also of his justice, and it silences Job, who accepts it as a sufficient answer. That God does not reveal the key to the riddle even to the man who has victoriously stood the test and vindicated his faith in humanity is perhaps the most significant point in the story. It suggests that there is not and never will be an explanation of human suffering that humankind's intelligence can comprehend, sufferers must, like Job, cling to their faith in themselves and in God. They must accept the inexplicable fact that their own undeserved suffering is the working of God's justice. The conclusion of the book of Job. The book of Job lays emphasis on the moral that the wicked sometimes prosper, while the good are afflicted. It is a portrayal of one man's sufferings, which serve as a mirror to the experiences of those who suffer in this world. The Epistle of St. James, chapter 1, verse 12. Blessed are those who endure when they are tested, echoes the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, where he pronounces 9 blessings on those who seek God. The second of the 9 blessings is in Matthew chapter 5 verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. We are left with the doubt why a righteous man like Job should suffer, and do not get a convincing answer to this until our blessed Lord appears in the New Testament. The dual speech pattern found in the book of Job adds more meaning by the way Job's afflictions functions as a harbinger of Jesus' sufferings. Jesus asked his Father to let the cup of suffering he was about to drink pass from him. Matthew chapter 26 verse 39. It was not possible because this was the way the Father could think to vindicate his character to the world in the face of Satan's act of assassinating his character by conquering earth that God created. Just as the Father used his Son, Jesus' suffering, to defeat Satan on the cross, he used Job's suffering to defeat Satan's character assault on Job. Eventually, it was good for Job, an embodiment of righteousness, to suffer. Thank you. Friends, please subscribe our YouTube channel for more e-learning to advance your knowledge. Thank you and God bless.